I trusted my parents with everything, not just my childhood, not just my dreams, but my future. At 26, I had spent 8 years working double shifts, skipping vacations, saying no to dinners, wearing the same old shoes while everyone else upgraded their lives. Every dollar I saved had one purpose: freedom, my freedom. So when my parents asked me to temporarily transfer my savings into their account for safety, I didn't question it, because that's what daughters do. They trust, they sacrifice, they believe. But one quiet Tuesday night, while scrolling through my banking app, my world stopped. My balance wasn't low, it was empty. Every single dollar, gone. No warning, no explanation, just a note in the transaction history. Transfer, Daniel investment. Daniel, my younger brother, the golden child, the son they always protected, the son who had never worked a single double shift in his life. My hands trembled as I called my mother. Her voice was calm, too calm. "It's for your brother's business, Kendra." He needed support. Support? With my life savings? That night, I realized something terrifying. They hadn't just taken my money, they had chosen him over me. Again. But what they didn't know, what none of them realized, was that in their rush to secure his future, they had made a mistake so massive, it would destroy everything they were trying to protect. And I was about to find it. My name is Kendra. I am 26 years old. And for most of my life, I believed love meant sacrifice. I grew up in a house where silence was obedience and obedience was love, where approval wasn't given freely, it was earned. My parents weren't cruel in obvious ways. They didn't scream daily. They didn't starve us. They didn't abandon us. What they did was quieter. They measured worth. And somehow, my brother Daniel always measured higher. Daniel is 2 years younger than me, charming, confident, the kind of boy teachers described as full of potential. My parents loved that word, potential. They repeated it like a prophecy. "He's going to do big things," my father would say. Meanwhile, I was already doing big things, but achievement didn't excite them the way possibility did. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would smile politely and say, "That's expected of you, Kendra." Expected. When Daniel barely passed math, my father took him out for ice cream. "See, he just needs encouragement." Encouragement. I learned early that my role in the family was stability. I was the responsible one, the calm one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who understood finances, the one who helped mom with paperwork, the one who explained bills to dad. I became useful, and usefulness became my identity. After college, I moved to the city and started working at a marketing firm. Entry-level position, long hours, brutal competition. I didn't have connections. No family friend recommended me. I earned that position through relentless effort. I would wake up at 6 a.m., commute an hour, work 10-hour shifts, sometimes 12 during campaign season. I skipped team dinners to save money. I didn't travel. I didn't upgrade my phone when everyone else did. I said no to impulsive shopping. Every month, I transferred 70% of my salary into savings, not because anyone told me to, but because I promised myself something when I was 16 years old. I would never be financially dependent on anyone, not a husband, not a man, not even my parents. By 26, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small apartment. Nothing luxurious, just something that was mine. My space, my safety, my proof that I could build a life independently. My parents knew about my savings because I had trusted them. That's the part that still burns. Every Sunday I visited them. It was tradition. My mother cooked. My father discussed politics. Daniel usually showed up late, talking about some new idea or opportunity he was exploring. One Sunday evening, about 3 months ago, my father brought up finances. "You shouldn't keep that much money sitting in one account," he said casually while cutting his chicken. "Banks freeze accounts all the time. Fraud investigations. Technical issues." I frowned slightly. "Mine's stable." My mother chimed in gently. "It would be smarter to move it into the family account. We can monitor it, keep it secure." I hesitated. It wasn't that I didn't trust them. It was that the savings represented years of exhaustion, of discipline, of saying no. "It's just temporary," my father assured me. "You'll move it back when you're ready to buy." Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah, sis, don't be dramatic. It's not like they're stealing it." He laughed. And I laughed too, because the idea was absurd. They were my parents, so I agreed. But I added one condition, something practical, not emotional. For transfers over 10,000, I said carefully, I want dual authorization. My confirmation required. My father waved a hand. Of course. We're not dictators. We went to the bank together the following week, signed paperwork, adjusted permissions. I watched the numbers shift from my private account into the joint family account. 6 figures. Years of my life converted into digits. I told myself it was safe. Weeks passed. Nothing seemed unusual. Then Daniel made an announcement at dinner one night. I'm launching a tech startup, he declared proudly. My mother's eyes lit up. That's wonderful. My father leaned back in his chair, beaming. I knew it. I always knew you'd do something big. I listened quietly. What kind of startup? I asked. Digital logistics platform, Daniel said vaguely. Disruptive model. Investors are interested. Which investors? I pressed. He smirked slightly. Working on it. I noticed my parents exchange a glance. Subtle, quick, almost invisible. But I saw it. Still, I didn't connect the dots. Because I didn't want to. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday night, I was sitting on my couch reviewing property listings. I had found a small 1-bedroom apartment near my office. Modest, but perfect. I decided to check my savings one more time, just to feel that reassurance. I opened my banking app, logged in, and stared. Balance, 0,0. My heart didn't race at first. It stalled, like it refused to process what my eyes were seeing. I refreshed, still 0. I checked the transaction history. There it was, a full transfer, every dollar. Moved 3 days earlier. Destination, Daniel Business Operations. My chest tightened so violently I had to stand up. No notification, no authorization request, no confirmation from me. Which meant one thing. They bypassed the dual authorization setting. My hands trembled as I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. You saw it, she said quietly. Not confusion, not shock, recognition. You took my savings? My voice sounded distant, even to me. It's an investment, she replied calmly. Your brother needed capital. That was my money. It's family money, she corrected. The correction sliced deeper than the theft. My father's voice echoed in the background. Tell her to stop overreacting. Overreacting. 8 years of discipline. Called overreacting. I had plans, I whispered. And Daniel has potential, my mother said softly, as if explaining something obvious to a child. You're stable, Kendra. You'll recover. He needs this more. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Then I sat in silence. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was suffocating. They didn't ask. They didn't discuss. They decided, because in their minds, my hard work was expandable, replaceable. I was the reliable daughter, the safety net, the backup plan. But as the shock settled, something colder replaced it. Calculation. Because there was one thing my parents forgot. I work in digital systems. I understand authorization protocols, and dual verification cannot be overridden casually. If they transferred that money without my confirmation, someone manipulated the account permissions, and manipulation leaves a record, a timestamp, an IP address, a signature. They believed I would cry, argue, eventually forgive. What they didn't realize was that the responsible daughter they raised understood documentation, and documentation can destroy empires. That night, I opened my laptop, not to cry, but to investigate. Because if they were willing to cross this line, I needed to know how far they were willing to go. And that was the moment I stopped being the obedient daughter and started becoming something else entirely. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me. At 26 years old, after discovering my parents had drained every dollar I had saved for nearly a decade, I expected to collapse, to scream, to drive back to their house and demand answers. Instead, I made tea, sat at my dining table, opened my laptop, because pain can paralyze you, or it can sharpen you, and something inside me had turned razor sharp. The transfer had happened 3 days earlier at 11:42 a.m. I was in a campaign strategy meeting at work at that exact time. I remember because I had presented performance metrics to a difficult client who questioned every number, which meant one thing with absolute certainty: I did not authorize that transaction. I logged into the joint account portal through the extended security dashboard, a feature most users don't even know exists. Working in marketing tech taught me one thing. Platforms always store deeper logs than what's visible on the surface. The main transaction page showed nothing unusual, but the back-end activity log? That told a different story. Permission settings had been modified one day before the transfer. Dual authorization removed. Authorization threshold edited. Notification email changed. Changed to an address I didn't recognize. My pulse slowed. Because this wasn't impulsive. It was planned. I leaned closer to the screen. The modification had been made from a desktop device. Location tag, my parents' neighborhood. Timestamp 8:16 p.m. I checked my phone gallery. At 8:16 p.m. the previous night, I had been at dinner with coworkers. I even had photos, laughing, smiling, oblivious, which meant whoever changed those permissions had access to the account credentials. And the only two people with that access? My mother, my father. My throat tightened. They didn't just decide as parents. They engineered it. Carefully, I scrolled further down the log. The email address linked to the modified notifications ended in something strange. A private domain alias. Not my mother's usual Gmail, not my father's work email. A new address, created 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, right around the time Daniel announced his startup. My stomach twisted. This wasn't emergency support. This was premeditated redirection. I opened Daniel's social media next. Public posts, motivational quotes, entrepreneurial captions. But then I noticed something interesting. 3 weeks ago, he had posted a photo in a co-working space downtown. I zoomed in. Behind him, slightly blurred, was a whiteboard. On it, scribbled in blue marker, were numbers. Large numbers? Investment projection, $250,000 initial capital. My savings had been $248,600, close enough to make my chest burn. I sat back slowly. They didn't help him. They funded him, entirely. With my future, I should have felt heartbreak. Instead, I felt clarity. Because the more I examined the timeline, the more obvious the flaw became. They removed dual authorization. They changed the notification email. They transferred the money. But they forgot something critical. The bank system automatically sends archive confirmation, copies to all original signatories when security settings are altered, even if primary notifications are redirected. It's a regulatory compliance requirement, and I had never checked my spam folder until now. I opened it, scrolled, and there it was, a security alert email dated 3 days ago. Your account authorization settings have been modified. Attached was a PDF log. I downloaded it, opened it, and froze. The modification wasn't authorized under my father's name. It was under Daniel's user access level, secondary administrative override. My father had added Daniel as an administrator on the joint account without telling me, which meant legally, and this was important, Daniel had directly accessed and altered account permissions, not my parents. Daniel, the golden son. My hands went cold because this changed everything. Parental moral betrayal was one thing. Unauthorized financial manipulation under false authorization? That was different. That was liability. I stared at the screen for a long time. Memories replayed in fragments. Daniel laughing at dinner. Don't be dramatic, sis. My father saying, we're not dictators. My mother calling me selfish. They believed I would never look deeper. They believed I would accept the family investment explanation. But they underestimated one thing. I document everything. At work, documentation protects campaigns. At home, documentation would protect me. I created a new encrypted folder on my laptop, labeled it simply Evidence. Inside it, I saved the activity log showing permission changes, the timestamp records, the modified notification email, the PDF authorization summary, screenshots of Daniel's public investment projection. Then I did something they would never expect. I didn't confront them, not yet, because confrontation gives the guilty time to prepare defenses. Silence makes people comfortable, and comfortable people make mistakes. The next Sunday, I went to dinner as usual. I smiled, complimented my mother's cooking, asked Daniel about his startup. He was glowing. We secured initial funding, he bragged. Oh, I tilted my head. From who? He glanced at my parents briefly. Private investors? I nodded slowly. How's the paperwork structured? He blinked. What? Equity distribution. Liability clauses, debt structuring. He shifted in his seat. It's handled. By who? I wanted to ask, but instead I smiled again, because I noticed something else. Daniel didn't look confident. He looked nervous, and nervous men talk. After dinner, while my mother washed dishes, Daniel stepped outside to take a call. I followed quietly. He didn't notice me standing near the side window. I told you the money's secured, he hissed into the phone. She doesn't know. My heart pounded, not from shock, from confirmation. I can't pay that back yet, he continued. The platform isn't ready. Just give me time. Pay that back? To who? There was more than just my savings. I stepped back before he saw me. My mind was moving faster now. If Daniel owed someone money, if he used my savings to cover something prior, then this startup wasn't an opportunity, it was a rescue mission. And my parents had chosen to rescue him by sacrificing me. But here was their biggest mistake. They assumed I was alone. They assumed I had no leverage. They assumed I wouldn't fight. They forgot one critical truth about their daughter. I build strategies for a living, and every strategy begins with understanding your opponent's weakness. Daniel had just revealed his, and I was about to dig deeper, not for revenge, not yet, but for truth. Because when truth is exposed carefully, it doesn't just hurt, it destroys. That night, I didn't go home. I drove. No destination, no music, just the sound of my own breathing filling the car. Daniel owed someone money, not business investment money, not startup capital, debt. The way his voice tightened when he said, I can't pay that back yet. That wasn't ambition. That was fear, and fear leaves cracks. The next morning, instead of going straight to work, I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Marcus Hale. Not a friend, not exactly, but a former client of our firm, a financial compliance consultant who specialized in risk assessment for small businesses. We had worked together on a campaign once, and he had liked me because I asked dangerous questions, as he put it. He answered on the third ring. Kendra, that's unexpected. I need a professional favor, I said calmly. Silence, then intrigued. Go on. I didn't give him emotions. I gave him facts. A new startup. No visible investors. Sudden capital injection. Possible undisclosed debt. I asked him how someone might verify whether a private company had outstanding financial obligations or liens. You're investigating someone, he said lightly. Yes. Personal. Yes. He exhaled slowly. Send me the company registration name. I had already looked it up. Daniel's business was registered 2 weeks ago under the name D&L Logistics Solutions LLC. Marcus called me back 3 hours later. His tone was different, less casual. Your brother is either extremely unlucky, he said carefully, or extremely reckless. My grip tightened around my phone. Explain. There's no major investor attached to the LLC, no institutional funding, no angel records. But there is something else. What? A short-term private loan agreement filed under personal guarantee. High interest. Very high. How high? 28%. My stomach dropped. That's predatory. It's desperation, Marcus corrected. Loan was taken 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. Before the startup announcement, before the family dinner, before my savings disappeared. How much? I whispered. There was a pause. 200,000. The world went very still. My savings had been $248,600, which meant Daniel had borrowed $200,000 at criminal interest rates, likely because no legitimate investor believed in his disruptive platform. And when repayment deadlines approached, my parents stepped in. With my money. He's already missed one payment, Marcus continued. Penalty clauses are aggressive. I leaned back against my car seat, breath shallow. So the money transferred into the business account. I began slowly. Probably went straight toward covering the loan exposure, Marcus finished. Not building a company, not hiring developers, not creating innovation. Damage control. They didn't invest in Daniel's future. They tried to erase his past mistake. With my future, they tried to erase his past mistake. With my future, is there anything legally questionable in how funds were injected? I asked carefully. Marcus was quiet for a moment. If capital entered the business under false representation of investor origin, yes, that becomes misrepresentation, especially if the funds weren't authorized by the rightful owner. My heart pounded. Daniel had signed administrative override on the joint account. He had altered authorization permissions. He had transferred money without my consent, then potentially declared that capital as business investment. That wasn't just betrayal. That was fraud exposure. I didn't hear this conversation, Marcus said carefully. Of course not. We ended the call. I sat in silence for a long time. Images replayed in my mind. My mother calling me selfish. My father saying, it's for the family. Daniel laughing. Don't be dramatic. They thought they were protecting him, but they hadn't calculated the scale of risk. If the loan issuer discovered the origin of funds was unauthorized, if legal scrutiny touched the business, if financial misrepresentation was proven, Daniel wouldn't just lose his startup. He could face legal consequences. And my parents? They would be implicated as facilitators. For the first time since discovering the empty account, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous, because I now held something more valuable than money. Leverage. But leverage is a weapon, and weapons require precision. I wasn't going to storm into their house screaming accusations. No, that would make them defensive. Instead, I needed confirmation. Proof that my money was used specifically to neutralize the loan. I logged into the business registry again, cross-referenced filing dates, capital deposit confirmation, aligned exactly 2 days before the first loan penalty deadline. It wasn't coincidence. It was rescue timing. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Dinner Sunday. Don't be distant. Don't be distant. As if distance was the problem. As if betrayal wasn't. I stared at the message, then typed back, "Of course, I'll be there." Because Sunday dinner was no longer tradition. It was strategy. They believed they had solved Daniel's crisis. They believed I was unaware. They believed the responsible daughter would recover quietly. But here was the truth they didn't see. They had moved illegally. They had exposed themselves, and they had placed Daniel's fragile dream on a foundation of deception. The biggest mistake wasn't taking my savings. It was assuming I wouldn't investigate. Sunday was coming, and this time, I wasn't arriving as their daughter. I was arriving with evidence. Sunday dinner felt different, not because the house had changed, but because I had. The same dining table, the same polished silverware, the same framed photos on the wall, Daniel's graduation centered, mine slightly off to the side. I noticed everything now, every imbalance, every quiet preference. My mother smiled when I walked in, but there was tension in her eyes. "You've been quiet this week," she said, kissing my cheek. "I've been busy," I replied smoothly. Daniel was already seated, tapping his fingers against his phone. My father poured wine like nothing in the world was unstable. We sat. We ate. We pretended. Halfway through dinner, Daniel started talking about expansion strategy. "We're scaling faster than expected," he said proudly. "Investors are impressed." I tilted my head. "Which investors?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Private," my father cut in. "Kendra, must you interrogate everything?" I placed my fork down carefully. "I interrogate what involves me." Silence. My mother exhaled sharply. "We already discussed the money." "No," I said calmly. "You justified the money." Daniel shifted in his seat. "Can we not do this again?" "Oh, we're not doing what we did before," I replied softly. I reached into my bag, pulled out a thin folder, and placed it on the table. No drama, no raised voice, just paper. My father frowned. "What is that?" "Documentation." I opened the folder and slid the first printed page toward them. Account modification logs. Timestamp 8:16 p.m. User Daniel R. Carter. Permission override. Secondary administrative access. The color drained from Daniel's face. "You removed dual authorization," I said evenly. "You changed notification emails. Then you transferred $248,600 without my consent." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Kendra." I held up a hand. "I'm not finished." Second page. Loan filing record. Private lender, $200,000. 28% interest. Missed payment notice, dated 3 days before my savings disappeared. Daniel stood abruptly. "You had no right to investigate?" I asked quietly. I had every right. It was my money. My father's voice hardened. "This is family business." "No," I corrected. "This is fraud exposure." That word hit the room like a glass shattering. Fraud. Daniel's breathing became uneven. "You wouldn't?" "Wouldn't what?" I asked calmly. "Protect myself?" I leaned forward slightly. "You didn't invest my money into growth. You used it to cover a predatory loan you took before announcing your startup. And if the lender audits capital origin and discovers unauthorized transfer, I let the sentence hang." My mother looked like she might faint. My father's confidence cracked for the first time in my life. "You're threatening your own family?" he asked quietly. The question almost made me laugh. "No," I said softly. "You threatened me first." Silence swallowed the room. "I spent 8 years building that savings," I continued. "You erased it in 3 days." "We were protecting him," my mother cried. "From consequences," I replied. "At my expense." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. I was going to pay it back. With what? I shot back. A startup built on hidden debt? He had no answer, and that was the moment everything shifted. For the first time, they weren't looking at me like the reliable daughter. They were looking at me like a variable they failed to calculate. I sat back calmly. I'm not calling the lender, I said. Relief flickered in my mother's eyes. I'm not contacting authorities. My father exhaled slowly. But here's what's going to happen. My voice was steady, controlled. Daniel will draft a legally binding repayment agreement. Full amount, with interest matching what he agreed to pay his lender. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. Interest? Yes, I said evenly. If I'm good enough to fund your mistakes, I'm good enough to earn from them. And if I refuse? He challenged weakly. I slid the final page across the table. A prepared email draft, addressed to the private lender's registered contact. Subject line, inquiry regarding capital source disclosure. Daniel went pale. You wouldn't ruin me, he whispered. I held his gaze. You already tried to ruin me. The room was suffocating now. My father looked smaller. My mother looked shattered, and Daniel looked afraid. For the first time in his life, afraid of me. I gave you my trust, I said quietly. You turned it into leverage. So now I'm using leverage properly. No screaming, no tears, just clarity. After a long, heavy silence, Daniel spoke. I'll sign. My mother began crying softly. My father didn't argue again, because they finally understood something crucial. The responsible daughter they underestimated had grown into a woman they could not control. I stood gathering the folder. One more thing, I added calmly. I'm removing myself from all joint accounts, permanently. My father nodded stiffly. You'll regret this distance, he muttered. I paused at the doorway. No, I said gently. You will. And as I walked out of that house, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel revenge. I felt freedom. They took my savings, but they gave me something far more powerful. Awareness, boundaries, and the understanding that love without respect is just control wearing a softer face. Their biggest mistake wasn't stealing my money. It was assuming I would remain the obedient daughter forever. They forgot something simple. I am Kendra, and I don't build my future on other people's lies.